Okay, hey, we're going to go over, excuse me, we're going to go over chapter 17 here real quick. Look at westward expansion. Chapter 16, we covered Reconstruction in the South. Now we're looking at how the nation's going to expand post-Civil War. There had been a, I suppose there had been, I'm not going to say restriction, but definitely a not enthusiastic welcome of westward expansion from the government leading up to the time of the Civil War because of the fear of expansion of slavery. That didn't necessarily prevent people from going, but it definitely wasn't encouraged. And then as people move further and further west, after the issue of slavery had to be decided and redecided and decided and redecided. And so then with the Civil War and the secession of the South, the railroad industry was able to plan and complete the Transcontinental Railroad because, again, one of the points of contention was the South wanted the Transcontinental Railroad to run through the southern states, and the North obviously wanted it to run through the northern states. And so you have the situation where you have sectional disagreements. So anyways, there's our video link. Manifest Destiny. Basically, before the mid 1800s, it was kind of believed that lands west of the Mississippi were just, they called them the Great American Desert, and it's just they were unfit to support human settlement. There wasn't a ton of rain during that time frame, and so it was kind of believed that crops wouldn't grow. But as railroads start to be built and the possibility of having goods delivered from the east and from the west into the middle parts of the United States becomes a reality, more and more people are willing to move out here and look for ways to make things work. And so this idea, again, of manifest destiny begins to take hold. And manifest destiny is basically just this idea that God has chosen the American people to conquer the American continent and live in this American continent from sea to sea. The problem with this idea is the fact that many Native American tribes are going to live on the lands that these settlers are going to come and take. The West could represent many things to many different people. Fulfillment of the democratic promise, just basically that you can go out there and make a life by yourself, for yourself, with your own two hands, and own a little piece of land, which was something that in Europe was not accessible to people during that time frame. Land ownership was unheard of by the common people, at least in large quantities. And you were always working for a lord or a nobleman that would own pieces of property. And so the opportunity to own your own little piece of land basically kind of made you your own little king, right? You're king of your castle. You go out there, you get lucky, you strike it rich. Economic opportunity is a real possibility for people. And basically, it's also a way to spread the Christian religion, spread Christianity, spread Protestant beliefs into a new area. It was God's will to spread democracy and religion. After all, America was chosen to be this beacon on the hill, according to our founders, right? And so we're going to move and we're going to fill up this land and show how God has blessed us. It's going to place, Manifest Destiny is going to place whites in charge of other groups. So whites are going to be superior to Asians and Hispanics and Native Americans throughout this. And you're going to see this in the policies that are created that are going to favor white races over Hispanics and Asians that are also living in this area. Asians are going to come over to help build the Transcontinental Railroad, and then they're going to be cast aside once their labor is done. Native Americans are not even going to be thought of until they become a problem and have to be removed. And Hispanics that have been living in this area for hundreds of years are going to be mistreated and treated as second-class citizens. Computer's going to die on me here. Let me plug it in real fast. I think the book does a pretty good job of explaining that. How's the government going to help? Well, the first thing we're going to do is create the Homestead Act of 1862, and this is going to encourage people to move west. Why would you do this during the Civil War? Well, one of the reasons is you're trying to get as many states out there to prevent the spread of the Confederacy and the spread of slavery. Basically, free land settlers in the West would prevent the slavery from there. Basically, you had to be 21 years of age, and you're given a free 160 acres as long as the land was improved over a period of time. And so this is going to offer opportunity for very poor people, people in the East that didn't have the money to move out West, give them an opportunity to move out. It's also going to settle lands that probably were a little bit less desirable. So people are going to come out here, they're going to roll the dice and see what happens. And so you're going to see places like Kansas, for example, are going to fill up during this time. People are going to move out here. Actually, Kansas before that was a state, but Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, those types of places are going to start to fill up. Okay. Pacific Railroad Act, Congress is going to commission the Union Pacific to build a railroad west from Omaha, Nebraska, and they're going to commission the Central Pacific to build a railroad east from Sacramento, California. And they're going to give the railroad lands within 200 feet of the railroad to the railroad companies, which the railroads eventually are going to sell to farmers or other people, because those are very valuable lands. If you can get means of production or you can get goods brought out to the West, and you can control where those items are dropped off, or railways pick up passengers or cattle, that's big money. And so it's very advantageous for the railroads to own that land. It's also going to encourage people to move out there. Like, it's easier to get there. We have creation of forts in the American West, because this is going to be, again, the time frame of the Indian Wars. So like Fort Laramie or Fort Apache are going to protect people from Indian attacks in the American Southwest. You're going to have forts in Colorado and Wyoming that are going to act as trading posts for the mountain men or the trappers that are going up into the mountains and trapping furs and whatnot, and they bring them back. And then again, you're going to have those furs are going to get put on the railways and shipped out. And if you do that trading at forts, it's much more secure than if you just have like the rendezvous, which they would typically have. Forts in places that we're familiar with, like the Dakotas, Nebraska, or Kansas, are going to act as drought relief. They're going to be able to get supplies or goods to settlers that might face horrible situations if they don't receive certain reliefs. On the West Coast and California, the naval ports are going to help with Pacific trade in and out, with trade to Asia, which is very important. And these new class of settlers that are going to be moving in, typically you're going to start to see middle-class whites from the East move out West. You're going to start to see Northern Europeans, Swedes, Germans, Irish are going to come and settle. Typically, you'll see them settle in bands. The places I can think of off the top of my head, like Lindsborg, obviously in Kansas, attracts a lot of Swedes. It's Little Sweden. My family has Swedish heritage, and my family moved basically to McPherson or Little River because of that pull for the Swedish community. Germans are going to move to places like Inman, Kansas, or other German communities. And the Irish are going to come out and find new places to own land outside of large cities as well. Asians are going to move out to the Midwest. Hispanics are already here. After the war with Mexico, the Mexican-American War, the United States is going to basically swallow up parts of California, Arizona, New Mexico, big chunks of, well, Texas will come over on its own, but like those places are filled with people live there forever, and they were Mexican citizens, they were Spanish subjects, then Mexican citizens, and then they become citizens of the United States. And you're going to have African American settlers that move out here as well, freed slaves or free African Americans from the north that move west trying to create a better life. What's it like once you get here? It's obviously it's hard work. You're moving into a very hostile environment. Um, the lumber or the trees, like the wind blocks you see today, weren't existent, and so the winds would just howl. There's no lumber to build things, especially like in the Dakotas, Kansas. The weather's terrible. It's freezing in the wintertime. It's boiling in the summer. Um, the bugs are not only a nuisance, but they also destroy your crops. Debt, although the land is free, you have to get supplies and equipment, and that runs you into debt pretty quickly. And if you have bad harvest, then debt can get out of control. And then finally, just boredom. You're living on a farm. You might be 20 miles or 10 miles from your nearest neighbor. You might not even like them, and so there's not a lot of downtime, and there's definitely not a lot of time to socialize. And so like when church revivals, or a little bit later when we move into like the progressive era, and the Grange unions and things like that, any opportunity you have to socialize with other people is very welcome on the Western Plains. But just the amount of boredom that goes into living out in the middle of nowhere is pretty substantial. Think about how boring sometimes Kansas can be right now, with internet and television and all that. Now take all that away, right? Cattle drives. We think of this time frame as the heyday of the cattle drive, and that's true. Cattle is going to be driven up from Texas into Kansas, specifically Abilene and Dodge City, because the beef was so cheap in Texas. But you fatten the cows up on the cattle drive as they move further north, and then you get them on the railroads in Abilene and Dodge City, and you can make a ton of money. This is going to end with the invention of barbed wire, and farmers are able to fence in their lands to prevent free-range cattle drives from happening. When you think of Dodge City during this time, actually, it's the heyday of Dodge City is not during the cattle drive. It's actually during the buffalo hunting days of the railroad. Buffalo hunters would get, I think, like a quarter for a buffalo, and a buffalo hide or skull or however they would show that they killed something. And it was said that nothing in Dodge City cost less than a quarter because people had so much money, and just inflation was just wild. So that's a little bit of Kansas history for you. Gold, in 1940 or 1849, you have the 49er gold rush of California, which is going to cause lots of people to move to California, try to strike it rich with gold. And then they find in certain areas of California, you can grow fruit. You can have a nice little fruit farm. You can have a nice farm. And so more and more people move to California. People obviously looking for gold and to get rich quick. But the fact is that most of the rush, the gold finding, is over before the majority of people get there. And individual mining, like dudes with pans mining out of rivers, most of them don't make it. In industry, people, large companies move in, set up industrial mining operations, and they're the ones that are going to find the majority of the gold in California, or the silver in Nevada. Okay, make sure that you spend a good deal of time here on those 4 pages that covers the Native American struggle. I think the book does a better job than I would be able to do here. So read that with some great detail. I just want to call your attention to that. Chinese and Hispanics that move to the United States during this time. Chinese immigration is encouraged during the time of the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. And then after that, like 1882, you have the Chinese Exclusion Act, where you prevent any further immigration from China from coming in. And then you have the acts like 1879, where Chinese citizens are forbidden from being a citizen in the state of California. So to kind of protect themselves, you see Chinese immigrants that were in the country already start to form ethnic enclaves and form their own little communities, which they kind of police and protect themselves. Chinatown in San Francisco is an example of that. Hispanics that had been in what is now the United States for hundreds and hundreds of years are offered American citizenship after the treaty that ends the Mexican-American War, the Treaty of Guadalupe. But yet they still are going to face discrimination. They're going to face loss of lands, loss of rights over the years. Some groups fight back. You have the Gora Blancas, which is basically just the white hats. And they're going to form like kind of militias that go around and try to intimidate white settlers, and that doesn't work so well for them. But the Hispanics of that area do have some luck with political ramifications. However, as New Mexico gets more and more white settlers, Hispanic populations see their political participation, culture, and lifestyle kind of pushed to the side. Okay, that's going to get us through. This chapter 17. Hopefully it helps you guys out. And you have any questions, just reach out to me. All right. For this test review. 1, you don't have any time limit on your test, so take your time. Number 2, it goes pretty much in order. So get your textbook out, sit down with your book, and look up your answers as you go. Make sure those answers are right. It is much easier to maintain a high grade than to bomb this first test and then work all semester to get it back up, right? I don't think the test is overly difficult, but if you're getting it done in 20 minutes, you're probably either really, really smart or you need to go back and take your time. So I would say go back and take your time, make sure your answers are correct, all right? Reach out to me if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll see you guys in chapter 18 here shortly. Bye.